What if I told you the true genius of the Beatles wasn't just their songwriting, but an invisible hand shaping every single note? We all know the songs, the melodies that defined a generation. But beyond the catchy tunes and iconic lyrics, there was a silent revolution happening behind the closed doors of Abbey Road Studios. A revolution that didn't just define a band, but fundamentally and forever changed how all music is made. This is the story of how four musicians from Liverpool stopped being just a band and taught the world how to use the recording studio as an instrument. To uncover more untold stories and pivotal moments that defined the icons you thought you knew, don't forget to subscribe to Timelines Unlocked for a new perspective on history's most fascinating figures. In the early 1960s, a recording studio was a sterile, functional space. It was a place for documentation, not creation. The goal was simple: capture the sound of a band playing live as cleanly and quickly as possible. The Beatles' own debut album, Please Please Me, was famously recorded in less than 13 hours, a raw snapshot of their stage energy. But as Beatlemania exploded across the globe, the relentless pressure of touring began to wear them down. By 1966, they made a decision that shocked the world. They would stop performing live. This wasn't an ending, it was a radical new beginning. They traded the roar of the crowd for the quiet hum of 4-track tape machines, retreating into the sonic laboratory of Abbey Road to build worlds that could never be replicated on a stage. The first seismic shift came with the album Revolver. This was where the walls of the studio began to dissolve. John Lennon, ever the dreamer, approached producer George Martin with an impossible request for the song Tomorrow Never Knows. He said he wanted his voice to sound like the Dalai Lama chanting from a mountaintop. This wasn't a musical instruction. It was a psychedelic vision. The studio's young, brilliant, and often rule-breaking engineer, Geoff Emerick, devised a solution. He rewired a Leslie speaker, a spinning, rotating cabinet normally used for a Hammond organ, and fed Lennon's vocal through it, creating a ghostly, swirling texture that had never been heard before. The song became a collage of pure imagination, built from tape loops that Paul McCartney had been creating at home, fragments of sped-up guitars, orchestral chords, and sitar phrases, all spliced together and physically run on machines all over the studio, with technicians holding them taut with pencils. This wasn't a recording of a performance, it was a sound sculpture. This spirit of happy accidents and fearless experimentation became their new mantra. While recording the B-side Rain, the band harnessed the power of verispeeding. They recorded the backing track at a faster tempo, and then slowed the tape down on playback. The result was a thicker, heavier, otherworldly sound. Later, a weary John Lennon took the tape home and accidentally threaded it onto his machine backwards. What he heard mesmerized him. The next day, he burst into the studio demanding they incorporate it. The reversed vocal at the end of Rain was a first in pop music, a simple mistake that opened up an entire universe of sonic possibilities. This was the moment the studio transformed from a recording device into a co-writer. At the center of this creative storm were two indispensable figures, George Martin and Geoff Emerick. Often called the fifth Beatle, Martin was a classically trained producer whose musical knowledge provided the bridge between the Beatles' wild ideas and technical reality. He could translate a request for a sound that tastes like a color into a specific orchestral arrangement or tape effect. Geoff Emerick, on the other hand, was the audacious technician who wasn't afraid to break the established rules of recording. He pushed microphones right up against Ringo's drumheads and even placed one inside the bass drum to capture a raw, punchy sound that no one had ever managed to get on tape. He overloaded channels and pushed equipment to its limits, all in the service of creating something new. Together, this team turned the Beatles' abstract visions into sonic fact. Their studio mastery reached its absolute zenith with 1967's Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. This was an album conceived from the ground up as a purely studio creation, a piece of art that would never be performed live. They were no longer John, Paul, George, and Ringo. They were a fictional band, liberated from all expectations. The album's breathtaking finale, A Day in the Life, is perhaps the ultimate example of their studio wizardry. To connect Lennon's haunting dreamscape with McCartney's upbeat morning routine, they composed a chaotic, terrifying orchestral crescendo. George Martin instructed a 40-piece orchestra not with notes, but with a concept. Each musician was to start on their lowest note and climb to their highest over the course of 24 bars. The result was a symphony of organized chaos, which was then overdubbed 4 times to sound like a colossal orchestra of 160. The song concludes with one of the most famous sounds in music history: a single E major chord struck simultaneously on multiple pianos, with the recording levels pushed to the max to capture the sound decaying into complete silence for over 40 seconds. The list of their innovations is staggering. They pioneered artificial double tracking, or ADT, a technique invented by an Abbey Road engineer to save Lennon from having to sing everything twice. They used flanging, phasing, and extreme audio compression as compositional tools. For the benefit of Mr. Kite, George Martin physically cut up tapes of old Calliope music, threw the pieces into the air, and spliced them back together at random to create a disorienting, authentic carnival atmosphere. Even McCartney's bass playing was transformed by the studio. By plugging his bass directly into the mixing console, they gave it a melodic clarity and prominence that changed the role of the instrument in pop music forever. From the sprawling, stylistic chaos of the White Album to the lush, polished soundscapes of Abbey Road, made possible by a new 8-track machine. Their final years were a masterclass in sonic architecture. The ripple effect of this period is immeasurable. The Beatles proved that an album could be more than just a collection of singles. It could be a cohesive, conceptual work of art. They elevated the role of the producer and engineer from technician to creative partner. Bands like Pink Floyd, Led Zeppelin, and later Radiohead built their entire careers on the foundations of studio experimentation that the Beatles laid. Every time a modern artist uses a sample, a loop, or a digital effect to create a sound that can't be replicated live, they are operating in the world the Beatles built. They didn't just write the soundtrack for the 1960s, they wrote the instruction manual for the future of music production. So, the next time you listen to Strawberry Fields Forever or A Day in the Life, listen deeper. Don't just hear the song. Hear the room, the tape, the scissors, and the sheer, unbridled curiosity. You're hearing 4 artists and their collaborators playing their most versatile and powerful instrument of all, the studio itself. They walked into Abbey Road as musicians and walked out as sonic architects, leaving the rulebook in tatters behind them. What do you believe was the Beatles' single greatest studio innovation? Was it the tape loops of Tomorrow Never Knows, the orchestral madness of A Day in the Life, or something else entirely? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this journey into music history, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives, right here on Timelines Unlocked.